So tonight we're going to talk about setting up for IEP success. And because I work for a hospital, we always give a couple disclaimers. And that is that this is really my personal experience that I'm talking about and does not necessarily reflect the views of Children's Mercy Kansas City or UMKC. However, I've been here long enough that I often reflect exactly the views of what we, kind of stand by at the autism clinic. But it's not meant to replace any other tailored guidance that you would receive from any other professional. So with that, we'll get started. Whenever I hear somebody speak, one of my first questions I always have is really what qualifies them to talk about this. And unequivocally, what qualifies me to talk about just about anything that I do on autism is our daughter, Kaylee. My husband and I have 3 kids. Kaylee's our oldest, and she's 30, actually soon to be 31. This is a really, recent picture of her. She doesn't look 30, but Kaylee is very interesting. She has a profound intellectual disability. She also has profound autism. Kaylee is nonverbal. She is an amazing judge of character. She functions at about 12 to 18 months cognitively, and she needs support in all activities of daily living. And what that means is she needs support in dressing, eating, toileting, making any decisions. So if you can imagine, she's had all the best therapies through her life, starting at about 18 months. But she's still, even though she's learning some new things, she's still kind of tests out at that 12 to 18-month-old level. So that just gives you a picture of her. And all of our kids are different. So I just want to talk, since we're talking about individual education plans, I want to talk about her education journey because that's what I often get asked about too. So she has kind of an interesting journey. Kaylee attended a developmental preschool from 18 months to 5 years, which was the children's spot at St. Luke's Hospital, which is a fabulous developmental preschool choice here in Kansas City. And then we lived in Kansas City, Missouri at the time, and she then transferred to Kansas City, Missouri kindergarten, which was at Children's TLC at the time, now is known as Ability KC. And then my husband and I and 5 other families helped to start a new foundation called Fire Foundation, and it helped kids be included in the Catholic school system in Missouri, in Kansas City. And so Kaylee was the second year of our foundation. She repeated kindergarten because she was still very behind developmentally at St. Peter's Catholic School, which was our parish school for all the years our kids went through. Around 3rd or 4th grade, the school came to us. We got much farther down the road today with our Fire Foundation and the school involvement, but the gap was widening too much for Kaylee. And so in 3rd to 4th grade, she went to the Rainbow Center. So she was placed by the Kansas City, Missouri School District, because that was our district, at Rainbow Center in Blue Springs. And that's for communicative disorders, because Kaylee's number one, issue is that she's nonverbal. And after a couple of years there, and for Kaylee, not a lot of progress, we made a very hard decision to move to Kansas after we had done much searching for school districts and the right thing, because at that time, Kansas City, Missouri School District told us they didn't know what to do with her. And it wasn't our job, and we didn't know what to do with her educationally. So we visited these school districts, and at that time, we settled on Shawnee Mission and just moved ourselves 7/10 of a mile over the state line into Prairie Village. And Kaylee attended Shawnee Mission from 4th grade to 21 years. If you have a kiddo that qualifies for extended school from 18 to 21, it's usually kids that are very, very impacted by their disability, and Kaylee was. So she was from 4th grade to 21 years in various schools with the Shawnee Mission School District. We had an excellent experience there. Today, in 2024, she's in her 9th year at Lake Mary Valued Activities in Olathe. And that's a place where she goes every day, Monday through Friday, to get activities and to do things and to get support and socialization and all that. So that's where she is. So it just gives you a little picture of, kind of one person's walk, and that's Kaylee's. So the objectives for today are to learn a little bit about the history of special education law. I think to know where we're going, we need to know where it's come from. And so we're going to just talk briefly about that. We're going to learn how to get the most out of the IEP process. We're going to hopefully become a great advocate, teach you how to be a great advocate for your child. And I lost my slide really quickly. Sorry. And of course, learn to be a team player. So those are our objectives for today. And let's just learn first a little bit about IDEA. So IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It was first passed in 1975, and it is a special education law that mandates regulation for students with disabilities in order to protect their rights as students and the rights of their parents. And what it is based on is providing a free and appropriate public education. So this applies to the public school system, not the parochial or private school system. This applies to the public school system. And in addition to that, it's accomplishing that in the least restrictive environment possible for your child. So that's a little bit about IDEA. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is a federal law that supports special education and is related to service programming. So it protects children with an identified disability like autism. It protects their rights, their accesses, and ensures the efforts of institutions that are providing services to them are doing so, they're checking them out. And it provides funding assistance to states and federal agencies and educational service agencies in providing for their education. So this goes down just kind of telling you the same thing that I told you. That's what IDEA is set to accomplish. It's a big, big task. Interestingly enough, in 1990, it was known as the Education for the Handicap. And in 1997 and 2004, additional amendments were passed to ensure equal access to education. So what this means is that a child with a disability would get the same number of progress reports as a disabled peer. So we see that it changed from the Education for the Handicap to IDEA. And also at that time, it added traumatic brain injuries and autism as new disability categories. So what I'm going to show you is who qualifies for an IEP. These are the disabilities. There's 13 of them that qualify. Now, having said that, not necessarily does every single kiddo with each of these disabilities need an IEP. Perhaps they're high functioning in their disability and are acting, not only acceptable, but thriving in the classroom. But it's when one of these disabilities requires them to have some extra support. And autism is a qualifying disability for receiving an IEP. So what's needed before an IEP? The bottom line is there has to be an evaluation so we can have an idea of what your child's function are and what needs to be done going forward. Who can request an evaluation? The parent can request one if they feel that what's happening needs to be tweaked or needs to be fortified. The school, if your child doesn't have an IEP and the school feels like they need one, they also can do it. They can also request an evaluation. So, but this request must be put in writing, and it's usually it's the parent that's going to write the letter. So it's interesting in our world today of electronic things, there still needs to be a letter. I would imagine now the letter can be sent electronically, but this is, the way it was. There are several letter templates that are out there, and an evaluation, if an evaluation is required, um, it's needed to get information to present levels of academic function and performance. And they get that from objective assessments. So this in turn, the assessments help the team determine the goals for the IEP. So again, a parent can request it or the school can request it. And as far as getting ready for the evaluation, there is no need for your child to practice. That it's something that, they're assessing things that they should be able to, perform without testing, studying for something. You may or may not be there, but you still, if you're not there, you certainly can know when this is happening. So those are the specifics of an evaluation. Yeah. What's the purpose? Of course, to determine if special education services are needed. And I gave you a couple of reference points here in the Parent Center Hub. This is what gives some examples of templates that you can use. Families Together is a great organization here in town and nationally that can also help you. And then just some other articles on steps for requesting a school evaluation. What is great about the Parent Hub information is that it gives you tips on how to write the letter, how to state your needs clearly. Some of this, because we are so non-objective about our child sometimes, it's hard to really put a non-biased, letter forth. And so you want to think of this relationship sort of as a business relationship and one that is businesslike and respectful. And you don't want to go into this relationship of getting an evaluation, getting your child an IEP. You don't want to go into it demanding and insisting on things before you've met them. You want to assume that they are also out to provide what is needed to help your kiddo thrive and succeed, because that's everyone's goal. But this just gives you some reference points to check out. And after this presentation, I will pass on these slides tomorrow, probably when I come into the office. And so I will give you a copy of them for your reference. An evaluation is made out of a lot of parts: interviews, classroom observation, a functional behavior assessment, and other evaluations like speech language done by a speech language pathologist, physical therapy if they have some needs in that department, occupational therapy, et cetera, et cetera. So, and once an evaluation is requested, it needs to be completed within 60 days of a request. So a functional behavior assessment, just so you know, is a process for identifying problem behaviors and then developing interventions to improve or eliminate those behaviors. For example, my Kaylee was highly distractible. So when she was doing some of her one-on-one work in the classroom, she would be at a desk with a screen that blocked the sight of the room so she could focus. Otherwise, she was super distracted about what was going on. So it was a visual block. And so for a kiddo that has trouble with transitions, they could have a visual schedule done or set a verbal or reminder or warning that, when in 5 minutes, the bell is going to ring and we're going to transition to our next class. So what this evaluation does is try and figure out how they best can help your child with what they see as they assess them. So what is an IEP? An IEP stands for Individualized Education Program or Individualized Education Plan. I see it interchangeably used. It's a written document that's developed for each public school child who is eligible for special education. It's created through a team effort, like we talked about, and reviewed at least once a year. Before an IEP can be written, your child must be eligible for special education. But what we know and what I imagine is with those of you that are listening to this training, most likely you have a child with autism, and that is a qualifying disability for an IEP. So that's something that's already a given for us. Who are members of the IEP team? Parents, or caregivers or guardians, if they're the ones that are looking after the child. At least one of the child's general education teachers, at least one of the child's special education teachers or providers, a school district representative who is knowledgeable about special education and general education, a school psychologist or an autism specialist, if your school district has that, and that's for a kiddo with autism. And then once they get older, like to the 14 to 21-year-old level, transitioning to adulthood, they often include the child and actually encourage us to include the child in the IEP. Okay? So the literature I have read says that it sets a good impression if both parents attend. And if that would have the possibility of not being a best case scenario, then you can use your good judgment and determine to make sure that all what you've reviewed at the IEP meeting and agree on, that you share that with the other parent if they're part of that child's life. So I will tell you, I I'm kind of the one, my husband and I imagine you can relate to this. We kind of have a division of responsibility at our house because we had two other very active kids also, so three total kids. And so this was my responsibility. This was my purview that I handled. Dan did come to a couple of IEPs, and I will not tell you that he was a really big help because we'll talk about reviewing the past IEPs and things like that. I had not provided it in enough time for him to do that. And I will all of it to say, if you're both going to attend, make sure you both have done your due diligence before the actual IEP, so as not to badmouth my sweet husband. So about education records that you should keep as a parent, we just say get a big bin. Robin Jordan and I, our family resource specialist, said, I would just get a bin like this and keep, current and previous IEPs. I always kept their IEPs in a binder because it just would help me refer when I go to the next meeting. But what this box can do is keep representative examples of your child's work. Sometimes when your kiddo gets, physical therapy or occupational therapy or reading or some things, by keeping some of their work, you can see progress and you can see maybe something that needs to be supported better or additionally. And then keeping correspondence from school is really helpful as well. So that's what we're keeping in that box. As you prepare for a new year, for the school year, you want to clean out their organization notebook and update it. Print out every page of your child's IEP. You would want to review their daily schedule because going into the IEP, you may talk about some transitional things or opportunities for socialization that they might have. All of these things are things that can be considered and applied to the IEP. And then send a copy of your child's IEP and an introduction letter to each member of the IEP team. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I mean, this is really kind of going over the top, but I really love this idea. So for our kids, this is an introduction level template that's done by a company called Understood, and it's down here. It's fun. It's a fun idea to have your kiddo complete this themselves. So the younger kiddos, maybe grade school kiddos, they can sign, their name, my name is, or you can help. I like to be called, because maybe that's something other than their name. This school year, I'm looking forward to, maybe riding the bus for the first time. I want my new teacher to know this about me. My favorite subject in school is this, and this is the reason why. When I'm not at school, I like to, what extracurricular activities or things do they like to do for recreation or their interests? They may love music, they may, play an instrument. And then sometimes I need extra help with this. And I think it's really, if your child can give their perspective, I think it's golden. I think it's just golden. For the older kids, this is the style that we show for them. So this year, same questions, just put in something that doesn't have any visuals. And so these are templates that you can, get and print off and then attach their IEP, and it kind of introduces them to the team ahead of time. And I think that's really a powerful and really lovely thing to do. So introduction level templates. The things that'll be, so then the anatomy of an IEP, like what all happens is that you have members of the IEP team. You talk about present level of academic and adaptive functioning. You talk about annual goals. You talk about how progress will be tracked and reported. They cover what services will be provided. This would be something like additional therapies, and then supplementary aids and services, maybe like an augmentative communication device, something like that. And then as a parent, you need to consent to this IEP. That's part of what it has to be included on the IEP. So the annual goals are, broken into specific and measurable language and a discussion on what services will be provided in the increments of time that they will be provided, such as speech 30 minutes per week or any other supplemental service, one-on-one help for reading, para support at lunch. All of those would be things that would be talked about and put on specifically on the IEP if needed. You don't need to sign off on the details of the IEP the day that it's worked out, but you eventually will need to give consent before it's implemented. So, different things I've read say, don't sign off on it the day of, take it home, review it, and then give your consent because maybe you'll want a few more changes. And I think that's pretty sound advice. So here's what you need to do prior to the meeting. You need to think about your child's strengths. You need to dream about their future, what you could see them doing, what they could see themselves doing. Identify areas of growth and opportunities, and then list some goals that you have for them or they have for themselves. So focus on things you would like your child to accomplish or work towards. If you can articulate their strengths, it may help the participants that are a part of the IEP team devise goals accordingly. So don't worry about defending what they can do. Goals for a new year is an opportunity to grow further in what they can accomplish. So start at least a week in advance of the meeting so you have time to do that work. This is not something that can be figured out the night before. So please give yourself time to give your best for this one, particular, very important meeting for your child. The goal of every IEP is to help and not hinder. And its purposes is, again, to realize and recognize their strengths and their challenges, and to formally develop and enforce special accommodations to ensure that they're going to be successful in school. That's every goal. That's the goal, of every IEP. And I really like those. So what goes on in IEP? Again, goals do. So these goals are broad areas identified that need improvement. And then they break that down into objectives that are specific benchmarks within the area that help better assess progress. So, I put a couple goals out here. Danny will increase his skills in mathematics. That's a goal. Jackie will improve her toileting skills. Again, a goal. An objective on Danny would be Danny will complete 20 one-digit math problems in 5 minutes with 90% accuracy. For Jackie, Jackie will self-initiate going to the toilet. Sorry, I lost my at least twice per day for 2 consecutive weeks. So you can see they can differ greatly in their complexity and but yet, achieving this for Jackie might be as challenging as Danny completing 21-digit math problems. So this is why we call them individualized education plans. It's so fruitful and so rich that we can do this. Another thing I really, really want you to understand is that special education, this is a little bit of our shift in thinking. It's a service. It's not a location. So we must widen our understanding of what special education means. So it can look like no support at all. Like I said, maybe you have a kiddo that can totally thrive in the regular classroom. Maybe your child needs in-class supports. For example, occasional or full-time para support. That's a paraprofessional. Maybe they need help in reading and need a pull-out support for like a reading specialist. And maybe they need more like a self-contained special education classroom. These are a few examples, but again, the goal always is to serve them in the least restrictive environment that they can be in. So we're always looking that it can look like special education can look like many, many things. Okay, so some tips for before the meeting. And what I should say is, if you have questions through this talk, please put them in the chat and we will really try and get to them at the end. I'm trying to leave time at the end. So just go ahead and put them in the chat. I can't see that right now, so I'm going to have to wait till after I'm done. So tips before the meeting. Set aside time again to reflect. Has anything changed since the last IEP? Be prepared. Think of this as a business meeting with your best client. Rest and relax the night before. Again, you need to have good rest. I'm going to tell you, it's kind of an emotional situation. I'm not going to lie. At least it was for me. I had a child that was super duper involved. And so I was always feeling like I'm looking at more of her, her weaknesses than her strengths because she needed so much help. But you might see more strengths, and that's awesome. So just review, what you would like them to, do, and what goals that you might like to have them and goals they would like to have. So you talk to them about that. If you'd like, bring a support person or a scribe. I often say that person typically doesn't talk in the meeting. They're really just there to take notes. And often, like, my case manager wanted to be there as well. And so that's another person. And then start with a positive attitude. If you bring someone with you, you must tell the school district at least 24 hours in advance. And it's just a really practical consideration because they literally want to have enough chairs in the room. So that's allowed. And now, interestingly enough, there's been a law change a couple of years ago that you can also record the meeting. So, on your iPhone or whatever, you can record the meeting. Okay, so that's that. So things to think about before the meeting. And then again, I'm saying the same thing again. At the meeting, you can provide descriptions of their strengths, their areas of challenges, and also the perspective of what helps, the descriptions of the strategies that you use at home. This can help them tremendously. And then on the same token, they can tell you what works at school, and you can find some, common ground that you can make sure that you're working on things together. So as far as goals go, um, the IEPs can include and should include goals in many domains, including educational, social, emotional, potentially vocational, behavioral, and then adaptive. So a child must succeed in all of these categories to benefit from public school education. And so we want to keep all of these in mind when we're thinking about what would be the best goals. We want to make SMART goals, which stand for specific goals, measurable goals, attainable goals, relevant to where they are and what they're doing now, and timely. These goals can push your kiddo behind their comfort zone or beyond their comfort zone with still being realistic. So don't be afraid to challenge your child or put them a bit out of their comfort zone. It may be very good for their growth. And you'll have some people that are willing to make goals to help them, progress that way. So that's something really exciting about the IEP. A behavior plan or behavior goals can also be part of the IEP. So, for example, following directions, staying in the classroom versus eloping or running out of the classroom, transitioning successfully rather than having a tantrum. All of those can be examples of what can be on the IEP, which is really helpful. Parental tips, more tips for the IEP meeting. One was before, and this one is during the meeting. Build relationships. This is going to be a long-term collaboration with the school district. I find it very helpful to write down my questions prior to the meeting, and then once they're answered, check them off so I keep myself on point. Mm-hmm. Listen attentively and intensely. And if you're confused or you aren't quite clear on what they're saying, use your voice. Get something like, can you give me an example of how that would play out? Can you give me an example of what they do? That's rather than saying, I don't think they do that. You can say, give me a, for instance, okay? Sometimes you might not quite follow what they're saying or what they're doing. And you can say something very simple and non-judgmental like, I'm feeling confused. Can you explain that again? That might be about, especially when they start talking about goals and breaking them down. And then another wonderful reflective thing to keep in mind is what I heard you say was this. So you're reflecting what they said, and so they can be sure that that is what they intended to say. So I will tell you, sometimes educators can start talking in school talk, and they use a lot of acronyms. And so I think this is really an important slide. Again, write your questions down. At one time, for me, they were talking about how difficult my child was. They're like, do you know how difficult she is? I was like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. But in retrospect, I wish I would have said, can you give me an example of how that plays out in the classroom? Or, what I heard you say is you're challenged, give me an example of that. So it's so much, y'all, about learning how to communicate effectively. And that can be totally learned by listening to something like this. Also, something to remember is that safety can and should be addressed in the IEP. So something like eloping, which means getting away from a safe place, or, getting lost in the hall, or things like that. That safety should be addressed on the IEP. So just like I said, if your child has a problem with eloping, if your child has difficult behavior on the bus, then some goals should be put around that in the IEP. So it's just not within the confines of the school building, if that makes sense. That's an important piece. Also, during the meeting, and if you take nothing else away, I hope you've gotten something, but I want you to understand this. Number one, number two, number three, be on time. In fact, be early, because many people have rearranged their schedules to be there. The first time I came to an IEP meeting, I'm thinking it's going to be like 3 of us in the room, and there were like 10 people. And I was like, wow. I was like, wow. And I'm like, all these people are here on behalf of Kaylee. And I was really impressed. And I wish I had been better prepared. But the years went by, I often brought food to those meetings. I love to cook. And so I would bake a coffee cake or bring, you might ask for permission to that now because schools have gotten a little funny about bringing things in from the outside. But I always found that was a good connector. I would also always treat it as a business thing. So I literally would come in and I would say, "Hi, I'm Mary Ann. I'm Kaylee's mom. And you are?" And I'd offer my hand and they'd be kind of surprised, but they'd shake it and say, "I'm Sally. I'm her occupational therapist." "Hey, Sally, nice to meet you." And I'd go down the line. And it was really helpful to me to put a job to the face and then also be able to, kind of engage them a little bit more. Assume they want the best for your child, okay? Assume they want the best. Listen attentively, and then, as we said before, have somebody take notes. So those are some things to think about. Keep the emotion out of it. This can be hard. So what I want to tell you, if you're going to ask for something kind of extraordinary, it to be placed somewhere in the IEP or what seems like a big reach, practice asking that ahead of time before you come to the IEP meeting. Sometimes when we're talking about our child's deficits and shortcomings, I think rehearsing some of your comments can really help making them both two things, concise and understandable. And what I find a lot of times, if I kind of work that stuff out, kind of articulating it, I land on something that I really like. So, you know, just know you can really help your emotion if you rehearse. I think all public speaking requires a lot of rehearsing. You can ask if you can record the meeting because that will help you go back and, review some things. And again, you don't have to sign anything at the meeting. You want to make sure that you agree with what's being said. So this just says that there was a new law. This was a couple of years ago that went into effect that allows you to record audio record the meeting, not video record, but audio record. And you may need to notify the school 24 hours in advance in order to do that. In Kansas, each school district may set their own policy. So this was a Missouri law. So if you are part of a Kansas school, you may need to check on that before assuming that they'll do it too. And again, if you're bringing somebody to the IEP, like a case manager or personal scribe, you need to let the school know 24 hours in advance. This is in Missouri or Kansas. Bottom line, whatever is written on the IEP, the school is mandated by state and federal statutes to provide it. So the IEP becomes a legal document. So it's very, very important. After the meeting, thank them for their expertise and for their time. If IEP changes have been made, note what you understood them to be and follow up with an email. If you were asked to provide information, they want a copy of their developmental, screening. They want information from their speech therapist that might be also outside the school district. Just tell them you'll get that information and then follow up in an email. And I think that's really a nice consideration in showing that you're doing your part as well. It's just not all about them. It's also about you and your wants and your needs. One of my favorite educators that had my daughter for many years, I asked her when I was preparing this talk, tell me what you also would like, as working for families for many, many years, what else would you like to tell families? And this is what she had to offer. She said, work with the school team on a regular basis with information that's most helpful to daily life. So for instance, for me, having a nonverbal child, what I did every day was send a notebook in her backpack because she doesn't talk. And so she maybe had a bad night of sleep. She maybe is switching medications and maybe a little funky about that. I communicated every single day with what we agreed on, which was a communication notebook that went back and forth in her backpack, just as an example. Be willing to work with outside agencies also, such as the Community Developmental Disability Organization or outside therapists if necessary, or in addition to. If you sign up and an opportunity becomes available with these agencies, if you're on a waiting list, and then at the time that an opportunity becomes available and you don't need it, you can always decline it. But we always say get on every list that you can, because you don't know what tomorrow brings, and it just sets your child up for the greatest amount of opportunity that they can have. My friend Maureen also said have a healthy curiosity about your child's routine without hovering, especially as the child gets older. And I think that that is really sound advice. We're so used to managing a lot of things about them, but we have to be able to let them go a little bit as they get older. Think with the end in mind. For those that are significantly impacted, make plans and goals that support day-to-day independence. So what would that be? And then finally, for those stronger academically, but that struggle socially, make the social piece a focus. There are more opportunities for socialization in high school than after high school, but make sure you're considering sustainable things. So something that won't just drop off. So it might be getting a hobby, getting with an art group, maybe a singing group, whatever is their interest. Let them help develop that in school, and so that they may be able to take it when they're done with the public school education. I think those are really, really helpful tips. Never stop advocating for your kiddo. Give yourself, even after the meeting, you can give yourself permission to feel sad, but make a conscious decision, the next day to begin again, and have faith that if things are difficult, that they will get better. Life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond to it. And gosh, I think if anybody understands that, it's a parent that has a kiddo on the autism spectrum. So here are some helpful tips also from an attorney that has an autistic daughter that just talks about, again, that long-term relationship. You can seek an independent evaluation for your kiddo. Possibly insurance won't pay for it, so it may be on your own dime, but it may be very worthwhile. The school district can also do one and should do one. But again, if there's something that you think should be looked at differently, you may find it worth it to have an independent evaluation. But remember, you're going to attempt to sustain the relationship, keep the focus on the child's needs, not the district resources or your expectations, but on their needs. Get an independent evaluation if you need to, and remember to design specific, measurable, realistic IEP goals. That's very important. So that's those again. Sorry. And then I think that if you disagree, you can build your own record. But you need to support it. So document. Parents do need to be willing to face the reality of their child's abilities, but encourage everyone to love your child. And then when they do, let them. It's sometimes really hard, but it's sometimes really rich, especially for your kiddo and actually for you. One time when I was talking with Kaylee's day service about that, I was having problems with something else that Kaylee was involved in, and they were her day service was really advocating for her. And I said, well, this other organization over here doesn't really know her. You guys know her and you love her. And they're like, we do love her. I'm like, I know. That's what, no, I mean, we really love her. And I'm like, I know, I know. So I said, that's why I like to keep you in her life. I like the checks and balances of somebody that's really constant. And I think that's something that's really important as our kids get older too. You can call an IEP meeting review at any time. Once a year, you absolutely get this privilege. But if sometime during the school year you feel like something is really wrong or really needs to be changed, it is your right to call a meeting anytime. You can retain an advocate, a professional that might come with you. You can contact your state special education ombudsman. That's a hard word for me to say. And you can file a complaint and hire a lawyer. I mean, those would be in the worst, this would be in a worst case scenario. And hopefully, that wouldn't necessarily need to happen. But, if it does, then that's your right. Other special education resources that I just listed here are, Kansas Special Education. I want to bring your attention to this one and also this one. These are just two of my specific. One of our colleagues that is really active on our autism team and does a lot of evaluations, she came from Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt has a lot of really good things and about helping kids with disabilities. And this paper on building a homeschool partnership and what they have, the PDF that's right here for it, it's totally worth downloading. Now you'll know on the back they'll have specific information about Tennessee because that's where Nashville is, where Vanderbilt is. So disregard the Tennessee specific information, but excellent, excellent information on that offering. Subscribe to our newsletter, the Autism Clinic newsletter. If you don't already get it, hopefully that's how you heard about this today, but if you don't already get it, subscribe to it. It's just a click. And once a month we send it out to you. And that's really that's how we communicate with you. It gives you the latest updates from our team, such as help and support for parents and caregivers, such as what is the talk of the month, upcoming educational events like our caregiver parent conference that we have coming up, new additions to our clinics or services. We've added things like Ruby and just different things that we offer clinically that you would only know about if you're getting our newsletter. And then always research opportunities that you may want to involve your child or your family in. So those are all offered in the newsletter. And then I just wanted, these are references and resources. I think everybody that has a kiddo with special needs should have these books, all about IEPs. It's a must. From Emotions to Advocacy by Pam Wright and Peter Wright. I think then these other things are just really good articles that I found in preparing this talk. And then the next slide I'm going to show you, this is the Vanderbilt thing on how to build a homeschool partnership. And it's a many page document that is just full of great ideas and tips. It'll be just part of what can really, really help you succeed in this process. And then, so these are the two books that I said are just kind of like the Bible, if you will, of IEPs. And so I always, even though I've been at this for a very long time, as far as being a parent, I found so much valuable information in both of these and, frequently asked questions. Okay, so that is it, my friends. I'm going to end my slideshow and answer any questions that you might have. So I'm going to stop. Have I stopped sharing? Not yet. Stop sharing. Okay. And now I'm going to try and go to the question and answer, y'all. So let's see. We have some. Okay. So I scan and keep, someone said I scan and keep IEP files digital so that I can easily share with them. Would you recommend printing hard copies as well? The only reason why I say yes is that sometimes that's a little easier to take a hard copy. And I think if you have a way of organizing it to, the best of what works for you, I'm totally good with that. You just want to make sure you have a backup. So that's the only reason why sometimes I like to print out hard copies. So, whatever works, but I think this is good. Where can I find more about the law change that allows recording for the IEP meeting? It should be on that one slide that I gave you. It's kind of more detailed after I went over it a first time. And if you can't, then please contact me at mhammond@cmh.edu. Again, and I put my contact information on one of those slides also. So that's my email, and I'll be sure and get that to you. Can you record in the state of Missouri? Yes. Tips for adding behavioral goals to the IEP when they have not yet been added, and they keep saying they'll start practicing in small groups, but it hasn't happened all year. This could be an example of when you could call a special meeting to have this added, because you can specifically state something like this. They keep saying they'll start practicing in small groups. Okay, make that an IEP goal, and they'll have to execute it. So that's a really good example if you want your child, working in some groups. So that's good. We are in Missouri, and my daughter has autism and a high IQ. When I requested an IEP, they said they needed to see if she was qualified. I'm not sure I got that whole one. So this can be tricky when they do have high IQ, but it doesn't, they may still have adaptive needs or social needs or things like that. It might not be a specific educational need, but if you saw all of those areas that they need to be considered in, they still may qualify. So that's a good question. At what point should someone start this process? I have kiddos who are not yet in public school. They transition actually after 3 to the school district. So, they can start, my understanding is they can start that early, but for sure by the time they're going to kindergarten. Is this going to be recorded? It is recorded, and you will be able to access it in a few weeks. It takes a couple weeks for us to get it up on the YouTube channel. In your opinion, is it helpful to retain an advocate in the beginning when you're figuring things out, or is that more something that you would recommend as an issue is encountered? Really good question. Here's the thing. You want to have the school district feel that they can trust them. So I think if you choose an advocate, I'd probably interview them and make sure that they're not going in. The first impression you don't want to go in with is that you're not trusting the school district. So I think that it's a good idea to make sure that that person, because some of the advocates out there, no offense, are just kind of, go for bear. I mean, they can be pushy and, not always real respectful. And you always, starting out, you want to have a respectful situation. So I think you could find one, because it's a thing, like I need it now at the beginning when I'm trying to figure things out. I totally get that. So consider that. And I think also if you just read up a little bit more about what your rights are and how that could, what you can do, I think that you can probably get yourself more prepared than you think, and know what's up. And that's also your preparation in getting ready for that meeting and thinking about goals and thinking about what you would like them to do. So I hope I answered your question. I mean, I think you could check it out, but again, you want to make sure you never want to put yourself in an adversarial position starting out with anyone. And and not to say that an advocate wouldn't do that. I mean, perhaps that's just something that you would like to have along. And I think you can explain that and explain that you're figuring it out just that you have the understanding with that person that they're not going to put you in an adversarial position with the district. I think that's the key. I mean, sometimes on certain districts, I haven't heard it as much in the Metroplex, but often when there's just some really needs to be a stretch to have available resources and things for your kids, it might be helpful to have an advocate. Um, so possibly here's the here's the thing I would always I'll give an example. Before I did this work, I was a childbirth educator and a doula. And a doula is a labor support professional that is hired to go and help a couple in labor. And sometimes, in labor, women get understandably maybe uncomfortable and maybe, very forward and not necessarily saying the nicest things. And sometimes when they would quip at their nurse, and I was, trying to help them or whatever, and the nurse would go out and I'd be like, okay, look, she's the one that decides if you want an epidural, that she'll be the one to call the anesthesiologist. So let's be nice to her because she's going to determine our future. I kind of think the same thing about a school district. You have your part and they have their part, and we're going to assume that everybody wants the best for your child. One of the best questions when everybody was in a quagmire in one of Kaylee's IEPs, it was about something quite specific and something that she had a big deficit in. And we seemed to be at kind of a gridlock. And I just said to the professional in charge of this goal, if she were yours, what would you do? And then I stopped talking. And it was pretty interesting what the answer was. So again, I think you want to put yourself in a best case scenario and just always, make sure that you're conveying a respectful collaboration with them. I've got a few new questions I'm going to look like. For a child just beginning early childhood education, how as a parent do you know how aggressive the goals and objectives should be? For example, what is a reasonable goal for a nonverbal child? Maybe you explore, if a child is nonverbal, maybe you explore some things that motivate them. Maybe you explore or ask about augmentative communication devices or visual schedules or things like that that could help. Could you repeat the name of the books? Yes, that's they're on my slides. Let's see if I can find it. They're called From Emotions to Advocacy by Pam Wright and Pete Wright, and then also by the same authors, All About IEPs. So From Emotions to Advocacy and All About IEPs. Who at CMH do we schedule with for genetic testing for autism? There is no genetic test per se for autism. A lot of time, that's not going to tell whether they have autism. We don't have a test that can do that yet. But if you want genetic testing to find out some other things, we sometimes send kids that might have some other sort of disorder as well. I'm no medical doctor, I'm no nurse, but often we do send them for genetic testing or we recommend it. So that would be, once you meet with a developmental pediatrician. The slides will be shared if I didn't already say that. And then I have somebody that says, my oldest has autism with a high IQ and ADHD, and my middle child that I adopted has DMDD, restrictive attachment disorder, ADHD, PTSD. Yeah. Oof. The school district has denied both IEPs and only given minimal supports in a 504. Impact advised that I have to start slow and build a case. Impact is good. If you're able, you may try and find an advocate. Again, I'm not the expert on finding advocates, but I think what she's saying is start slow is the idea of, assume that the school district is going to be trying to help you. I'm amazed with all of those descriptions that, they denied IEPs. I mean, are they succeeding in the classroom? Uh, and so, just think about that. And if I'm not giving you enough on that, um, then please, uh, forward something to me at mhammond@cmh.edu. And if I don't have the answer, I'll find somebody that does, because it's a very good question. Somebody said it would be really great if an IEP mock meeting was created and shared. I love that idea. I love that idea. I'm gonna put that in my idea bank. So I think that's a super great idea. So thank you for giving it. I'm taking it and considering it. I don't have much choice on what's done here, but I often do have input. So um, I think that maybe I've gotten to all of them. We do have a little bit more time. So if anybody has, I'm just going to peruse them a little bit. You guys have been a very, very nice audience. I will again share these slides either tonight after we get done or tomorrow. And you can share this information with anybody that it might be helpful for. One thing we ask about the PowerPoint is that you not use it yourself because it's the property of Children's Mercy. It's property of me and Children's Mercy because I've referenced all the content that I use. That's not my own ideas, which is most of it referenced. But just know that it's our property because we created it, so it's individualized. Um, I wish you all, you've asked really good questions, and I hope by maybe providing the slides, I'll give you a basis for, to go further in your education and being an advocate. And you just can't be, as parents and caregivers, we can't be too informed. And so I think we have to take this on as a task of being the very best advocate, respectful, informed, and I know, like, where are we going to do that? Well, I guess at night when they go to bed. I mean, I understand how much you have on your plate because I'm living that still. And so I know it's really, really hard. But I will tell you, in this area of relationship with the school district, if they like you and they like your child, they are really, really going to be an advocate for your child. And I have seen that in my own experience with my nonverbal, super involved kiddo. And I think that you'll find that getting informed, educated, and rehearsing and having back and forth communication but not being too overbearing. I think all those things can really set you up for a best case scenario for your kiddo, which is really all we can ask for. And I just will say one last thing. Make sure, again, that those socialization opportunities and things, there's a lot more things in the Kansas City Metroplex now than there was even when Kaylee got done with school in 2015. But you just have to understand that you can even get them involved in those things now. There's different programs that they can be involved in with art, and there's the Farmer's House, and there's a whole bunch of different organizations that you can, for social purposes. There's Girls on the Spectrum at KU. So do some perusing and finding out, about that. There's one more question that came in that my child has difficulties with socialization. Do you know if any schools have any education programs in place to educate the student populations about autism and others? I think so. Like I know in the Shawnee Mission District, there's Share, which is, I have a couple of nieces that participate in that at Shawnee Mission East, and that's them interacting with the kids with disabilities. And I would just only hope that what they've done is done some education on the front side for kids on knowing what to expect and knowing how best to encounter and respect these children. So I would hope so. And I know a lot of different schools have interaction with peers and things like that. So I hope some education goes up front. And if not, let me know and I'll go out to the school and I'll educate them about somewhat about autism. And I really do mean that. I really will. That is part of my job as community education coordinator. So I hope that answers that question. I thank you, and I especially thank Will for helping me on the IT tonight. I don't know what I would do without him, and I wish you all just a good rest of your week. Thanks so much.